Hello, and welcome to Coffee Time. Coffee Time is a space where magical humans come together for some real talk, strong coffee, and powerful introspections on whatever is top of mind right now. My name is Natalie, and I am your host for this channel and today's super exciting conversation. The idea behind Coffee Time is that you are in your favorite coffee shop, maybe cozied up with a book, and you begin to listen in on an intriguing conversation between folks at the next table over. For that reason, there is no big introduction. We absolutely let the conversation speak for itself. And if you do want to know more about these special guests following today's episode, I invite you to check out the show notes for more details. So, on that note, let's dive right in. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. It's been a big, really timely week with what we kind of have planned to talk about. So it's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not. How does this work? Do we just get into the conversation, or
We
are we're
just
not being
start
recorded yet?
chatting.
Or we are.
Yeah, we're already, we just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely been an intense week in general for a
Mm.
lot of things to surface because of the eclipse that's tomorrow, and that usually we feel that energy before. So yeah, I've definitely personally in my life been having things come up that are intense. I'm not sure exactly how it ties into everything we were planning to talk about it, but it,
That's fine.
it probably does.
Yeah, it always kind of ties back together, right? What's been going on for you, if you're open to sharing?
Yeah, definitely just things that I had not, I knew I didn't fully work through them, but things that I have healed or released or worked on in the past that
Hmm.
I felt pretty good about where I was. I just kind of went into another layer of all that, definitely not purposefully, like triggered by random situations in my life that led me there.
Hmm.
And through that work, just reached like such a deeper level of um, closure or clarity with it, transcending like my current life and early life to, past life things and that whole connection and feeling like um, kind of ending and closing out a cycle with that to kind of be ready for what's next. So that was really powerful, if that made sense.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I'm always kind of curious because I haven't done much in terms of like past life stuff, and it's come up in a couple of readings that I've done for myself, like bits and pieces. But I've noticed, at least with where I'm at right now, my guides are very not cautious, but they kind of give me as much as I need to like step into my power and move forward. It's not really more than that. It's not like it's story time. It's just like, okay, you need some reassurance, like here it is, go do the thing. And I've got a couple, I don't know if you want, some people call it like intuitive hits. I don't really take it that way, but when I was working with like a local spirit on like past life connections to this area and some other things, but I haven't gone that far into it. So I'd be curious, like, what's your journey with that been like?
Yeah. So this week was a really deep dive for me with that and connecting with like my origins, like
Mm.
way beyond Earth lives. But a similar experience, maybe not exactly the same, but prior to this, and things just were clicking more and coming together. I do think that how it is that you're not going to need that information until or unless it's relevant. Like
Mhm.
if we've all lived, you know, hundreds, thousands, millions of lives, some on, percentage on Earth, percentage on these other places. Like we don't need all of that information. And then it gets confusing because like past, future, simultaneous, all of that. And then like timelines of just us living things out that, all these potential realities and potential timelines, and that they exist, even if
Mhm.
they're not being carried out in the way that this one is. So there's all of those, but it's I think for me and also even with people that I work with or people that do this work as well, it's like what will come up is what's relevant. So if you're working on some kind of a pattern and maybe you don't need even the past life stuff, maybe it's working on it in this life, but oftentimes some of the blocks that we have or cycles that we repeat, they're stemming from some situation. So in those contexts, that's when it, like, I think is relevant then to get information and sometimes even just the knowing, like, and without even experiencing it for yourself, like just hearing like, oh, that makes sense that I was in this, Japanese army and we were with of women and everyone was emotionally abusive to each other. And that's why I have, issues trusting women now. And I'm critical of myself because I took all of that in. Like,
Mhm.
even just that intellectual piece is like, ooh, like that makes sense.
Mhm.
And letting it go that way. And then sometimes you will have like the actual, or yeah, like it is definitely possible to go into different lives. You can like pick and choose. And if people guide you through this too, like I think that's ideal.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to like see things or do you want to like experience them? Or do you want to just know about them? Because some things might be more pleasant or still too sensitive. Um, so for me this week, I think I've had less experiences of like going into and experiencing past lives prior,
Mhm.
but from multiple people that I've worked with, got kind of the same information or the same few ones come up from kind of just, when it's like just too many different sources and they resonate with you, you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my experience with this healing, like it was two of those lives. It was just like, oh my God, like that, it was just full circle.
Mhm.
And that was working with like, and this I think is important that maybe anyone is listening to kind of just take note of when we're wanting to do healing. A lot of times we think we need to like think about it or release the emotion, even when we think like, oh, crying, but we forget so much about our actual bodies and
Mhm.
just going into the sensations and like the cellular level and going into that. And that doing that was what opened these
Mhm.
doors to me. Cause it was like, for example, one piece of that, like there was like this sensation in my throat. And I known from multiple people like, oh, like in one past life, you either like didn't have a mouth or didn't have a voice, but like you actually didn't have one or like it was harmed. And it made so much sense for me in that moment, whether people listening are going to be like, that doesn't make sense or it does. But for me, it's like, it felt like someone maybe I literally had a vocal cord injury or like had been actually like it had been like shot or something, but
Mhm.
that same sensation that I like leaned into was connected with my experience now and the sensations I felt. And after doing that, I've already noticed such a shift
Mhm.
in that area of life.
That's so fascinating. It's actually, as we're talking about this, I realized I was like, I did a reading for someone, and I'm not going to share too much because it's their reading, but it was a couple days ago. And it was the first time that I'd actually received information that did correlate to a past life. So that was really interesting to just observe. Like, it was very clear, like, the wounding that you're processing is not to do with this lifetime. And like, this is where you're carrying it. And so that was just, it was cool because like I hadn't had that experience yet. Um, and I think it's like one, me being more open to that kind of information coming through. And then two, like you said, like it will come if it's relevant. And so I don't think it's, at least for me, I think part of it is I haven't felt a need because I trust that. And so I'm not like searching it out, but also not discounting it. Like I know it's there and it might come through at some point. It just hasn't yet. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and all of that information is in the records for
Hmm.
when you would want it, even if it wasn't relevant. But I think for me, when I work with past lives or records for people, it'll be like, can you show me the most relevant past life for
Hmm.
this current situation? If we know already that it's not this current life, but then also you can go into the records and ask things like, where is my soul from, and where have I had lives, and that was even like very recent. I've known about those, but and it was relevant for me. Kind of I have like waves where it becomes more or less relevant, and that has to do with like different communications that I'm having with my guides or, all of that. But that was definitely a relevant theme that resurfaced for me. And I got so much more clarity around that. And I feel like a lot of people that I continue to interact with, and again, coming back to this like eclipse that's coming up, I think more and more people that are, you know, on a path to spread more light on this planet and help its ascension, if we could use that word. I don't know exactly who your
Yeah.
audience is,
Yeah.
right? But
You're used to me talking about all things. I was talking to someone recently, or today actually. I was talking to a friend this morning, and I mentioned that I just started seeing a new therapist as of yesterday. So actually really timely with the full moon eclipse business, with just like what we were going through and everything, the more I learn about it. And I said that before I started working with this person, I disclosed, I was like, just so you know, I talk to spirits. I've gone through the attempt at clinical diagnosis. It doesn't fit. So I need you to know that this is true. And I might reference it in our work together. So like, that's my like day one conversation with most people. Like even this friend I was talking to this morning, within 24 hours of us connecting, I was talking about theories of reincarnation and saying that I'm marrying my cat in my next lifetime. So I put it all out there. So like, don't even worry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So all of that stuff, right? And even that reincarnate, or that like, I work a lot with astrology and natal astrology. And what's interesting to look at too, when you're looking at family birth charts together, and you'll see how like the synastry between the charts is like uncanny, and that like, just exact conjunctions or exact things. This is a tangent, but basically that sometimes like, having to do with the reincarnation with your cat, knowing, these people in your family, for example, that like are going to be the ones that you most often are going to have the most challenging relationships with, like that this was not random. Like your soul signed up together knowing, yes, part of your soul, your soul contract and soul growth is to separate yourself from them and have your own self-love and identity and learn healthy boundaries. But also part of it is your job in there too. That was what I was working with a lot this week, like letting go of my pain, but also taking responsibility, knowing, okay, if my soul maybe actually is more evolved, but we signed up for this together. Like I still wanted to, there's still work for me to do in terms of appreciation or compassion and more acceptance and feeling my pain. But then knowing that like we probably signed up to be mother-daughter together. We were like, all right, we're arch enemies, like the one soul in the universe or galaxies I don't get along with. Let's do this mother-daughter thing.
That's so interesting. I'm not like, I'm very rudimentarily learning about astrology, and like I'm curious, but it's not like the thing that pulls me the most. But I've noticed with a couple people where I've looked into our charts, just like, and I don't think it necessarily means anything because there's so much more to it, but it's just been interesting because I look and we have certain signs like reversed. And the last couple people I've checked, it's like the same combination of things just flipped around in different ways. And I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah.
There's so much to look into, but it's all significant. It's just that sometimes to interpret from a surface level, like that meaning won't be,
because
but just like
so many more.
like nothing is random, right? Like absolutely nothing. It's all like you're going to connect with the people you're meant to connect with. But to tie it together, like I am, I go really deep into astrology. It's just a lot. And my birth chart helps me understand and helped me. This is how I actually got into it. Like, like, why do I do that? It's like, I'm a Gemini rising. Like my chart is ruled by Mercury. Like I need to have all these different things. I have Mars in like your ninth house of, Mars is like our drive and our, energy and our stamina, in like the ninth house being like higher learning, study. So like, I love to go into all this stuff. Yeah. But for someone like you don't need it. It's the same. It's just a different way to translate information that you can pick up intuitively, ask your guides, get from the records, just feel energetically. It just is like, all of these are different ways to read those same things. Of course, they have like different specific things that like each one will share more of, but it's just another one of those tools. And it's helpful because I like that it's like written out and like from the stars, and it can be transcribed that way. Similar to how like working with oracle decks or tarot cards is this way to kind of bridge, intuitive information into something physical, especially like I find that like that's really helpful for people like not knowing, wanting to trust their intuition more. It's like, get some cards and like test that out first with intention and see how like every day when you pick a card, like it actually is the right thing for each day, to build more confidence in like, oh, there is this communication system here. And another like parallel is like crystals. So how crystals are like
Crystals. Yeah.
energy, but right, it's like it takes like for people that are wanting to like get tuned into like feeling or sensing energy and doing that work, like crystals are like this physical form of different varieties of energy, and like you'll know how like you're intuitively pulled towards some certain ones, and it's going to be the right thing to balance your energy at that time. And when you tune in, you'll be able to feel like the shifts in your mood or physical body and the tingles that you might get. So those are kind of like bridges, I would call them. Or yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important to touch on. I've mentioned it in a couple different conversations in different ways, but it's like worth repeating is I think like your entry into tapping into intuition or into like I call them like empathic powers, like more like clairsentience, that kind of thing. It will likely look very different than other people's, and there's no one way to do it. And I think the other thing that bothers me a lot, to be honest, this is like Natalie goes on a rant time, is like people, and I have fallen into this myself, like there's this draw and this pull and almost expectation, I think sometimes in like the online spaces, for you to describe the different things you're experiencing in like very concrete ways. Like it needs to be very defined. It needs to ascribe to this specific modality. And I don't think that always works. Like I think there's the side where if you're dabbling in a specific modality, like if it's Reiki, if it's Akashic Records, like respect it. And like truthfully, I need to do more research on like where the records initiated, because I want to learn the history to be able to honor that. And I think that's really important. And I don't think every experience we have of energy or intuition, et cetera, needs to map onto some framework. And I think sometimes by trying to do that, we actually limit the experiences that we can have and like hinder our progress of stepping into our power.
I agree. So what I do personally with that, because I am someone, like I said, I love to study a lot of things, but then I probably just overuse this word, but it's my solution to everything. I just call everything intuitive, meaning, and when I say that, it's like, okay, my version of this using like all of my senses and everything. So like, I know when I'm doing, and I don't like to even call them readings for people. Like let's say I'm doing a natal astrology consult. I've, gathered from all the different sources that I've studied that have like, that many people don't have the stamina or patience to study and go that deep. And then it's like with the layer of all of these things are archetypes, and there is no like one thing equals this. It's like this could be all of these possible manifestations, and explaining that layer, but then also my intuition and how it what words I want to choose and explaining all of these possibilities to them. And with energy work, like I, for example, like that fits on exactly with that. And I think it's just people just have to be drawn to your energy and just trust whatever you do. Because like I've done Reiki certifications and I love Reiki and I'm so grateful for it. But when I'm doing energy healing, that could be like, I have awareness of what that is, but exactly, I don't want it. I could just do Reiki for someone, but I'm going to be manipulating energies and getting information in other ways and have my own style. And I think everyone's going to have that with everything, anything that they do. So it's making, like it's so helpful and supportive to have methods to follow and tracks to explore. Cause otherwise, right, like people are trying to give you diagnoses and like, it's like, what's wrong with me? It's like, nope, like look at all these like literal, beautiful, multidimensional abilities that I have. So to have mentors or classes or trainings that can help you hone these skills and understand them and use them intentionally and not be scared of them and create structure around them is incredible. But then at the end of the day, it's like use all that as your jumping point and then make it your own.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's really powerful because I think for me entering this realm, and like I think I shared with you when we initially spoke, like it's a pretty new thing, but it's accelerated like really quickly. And I mean, it wasn't, I met with a friend yesterday who I hadn't seen in like 13 years. And she was like, but you were always intuitive. You were always tapped in. I was like, was I though? Cause like, I was just terrified of all the things in my house. Like that's where I was at. And I was kind of trying to like shut it down. Right. And now I'm like, well, I don't get to ignore it. But that's been a huge shift, I think, was when I actually, and maybe like it sounds like you can kind of relate to this in your own way. Like when I stepped back from all the things people were saying, from like, oh, you should try Reiki, it looks like this, or oh, it sounds like XYZ happened for you. And when I stepped back from having to like label and articulate in a way that made sense to everyone else, is when my gifts like rapidly became apparent to me and like more accessible to me. Um, and like I just stick like, if we're talking about like, you know, learning to trust your intuition or whatever words you want to use around that, we can use it as a catch-all because I think that people kind of do it and just simplify the conversation. um like taking the proof points into consideration, right? Like truthfully, because you and I did a exchange of things, and I was so nervous doing that reading for you because like knowing that you do this stuff, I was like, oh no, what if, etc. But the feedback you gave like reaffirmed it, and taking that feedback and like trusting it is so important. And I think like that helped me to know like, oh no, wait, I do have something to offer here, and like there's truth to what I am experiencing and transcribing in a sense, because I'm all like, it's not really me doing it, I'm just kind of here to get it out on paper for you. Right? Like I'm
Yeah,
the
to tap in.
middleman. Yeah. Yeah.
I think so much of what you shared, I could touch on, well, just that end part before I forget this, but yeah, that piece is really valuable. I've been in, so when I'm speaking about like just courses and things, I've been in and I also have and am creating
Hmm.
things for those purposes, right? That where we all have every literal human being watching this, whether they think they do or not, everyone has the potential to tap into these um, different senses and strengths and these psychic abilities and gifts. It's just a matter of intending to, and getting your system ready to, and maybe letting go of some other things to be a more clear channel, and practice like the more of that, and then confidence in that. And that's why tarot I talked about, or oracle cards, is a way to build that same confidence, like that this information is real and is helpful and is accurate. But then also like in a group program, for example, or with a friend, but better in a group program. So that's why I've created something like this, is that like you can, be in a class and like get a stranger's name, you don't know who it is, but do a reading and then connect with them after and find out, like literally, like you could bring them to tears. It was so accurate. It's like, and it's wild. I had this same feeling right after I began doing that, of like, this is the most easy and effortless thing I've ever done in my life. And it's the most helpful and powerful out of like all the different things I've studied and the skills I'm good at. It's like, nope, this one is just like me tapping in, sharing some things I see, hear, sense, or that come to me. And it's like this gift that is going to help this person so much. And we can do these readings on ourselves too, right? And like ask for information, but it definitely is, I don't, and we create this for ourselves to say it's like harder to do for ourselves or easier. So
Mhm.
don't, not necessarily that it's hard to read for yourself, but sometimes we just have more emotionally invested in certain things. So to have those outside perspectives and get a reading from someone else is so valuable and helpful. Even if you're the most gifted with your abilities, it's just nice.
Mhm.
And then the other piece from that, what was it? Oh, about translating. That's like such a interesting and like really important thing to think about, because it is, right, like this stuff is not, it's stuff from beyond our five senses. And some of it, like part of it, when I think if you're doing any of this professionally or to serve people,
Mhm.
um then you're definitely going to want to practice and work on how you translate the information that you receive into a way that is applicable, or it can be conveyed or expressed. But then there's other pieces that, like, that's what I mean. Like sometimes you are just, it's energetically the exchange is happening and you don't need words and there can't be words. And that's the thing, is like, so there is, yes, this skill of being able to communicate information that you can develop, and also just for yourself to interpret for yourself, let's say, not professionally, like, what does this mean? What is, what's the significance of this? And you'll build that through your own practice and your own rhythms. But then there's this other piece of, the limitation of human language. So it
Mhm.
might either take more time to best as possible convey what you're trying to and put it into words, or some things, like there are going to be things that just can't be said in words, or that are just really challenging to put into words.
Um, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I know for myself, and I was fighting this for a while because I actually did a reading for a friend as like practice. And I did it on like live, and we're talking like records reading. Um, but what I realize is that's not how I communicate information. Like it's just not my thing. And so I just know that as of now, like I am meant to write things out, and it's just how things, like always it's writing. Um, and that seems to just be the way it works. And like that might change in time, but like I think the other thing, and similar, like same tangent, is like just because that's how I convey information doesn't mean it's like wrong. And it's those other pieces too that you experience that might not be put into words. It's like, well, I'm just thinking, I was like, maybe for me that they are, right? Like, because it's all energy. Like we will communicate and interpret it in such different ways, which is kind of the cool thing. And like I've done what you talked about too, like getting readings from different people. I think the one part is like I have blocks up around certain topics asking for myself, right? Like when I was moving towards the point of my last relationship ending, I probably didn't actually want to hear that information. Yet I got a reading with someone else, and the story they painted, and it was very much like imagery that they described, because that's how they interpret a lot of the energy. I realized a couple weeks later was like spot on to everything that was happening. But I just wouldn't have been open to that within my own records. So I needed that perspective change. And it can be really powerful, I think, to have that. Just like when we did that reading together, right? Like a lot of the stuff you talked about, like I kind of like some of it I had like an inkling about, but just hearing it in the different way, and also having someone be able to mirror back like you did, like the practical steps I could take to start to work through like the fears, and like let myself feel the anger that I was suppressing, and to be given those tasks. Because if I've been resistant to processing anger, I'm probably not going to be the one to fish out of my records, or however I'm connecting, the steps I need to take to move through it, because like I've been resistant for 3 decades. Like, you know.
And I think it's like, yes, that, and it's also like to view it as like, it's not that like from a place of disempowerment or like you need help. It's
Yeah.
all the same, right? And it's all from your willingness, and you're asking
Mhm.
for, help me see this, help me move through this. Like that's, so whether it's that you tap in, or it's like you're open to that and you're going to be connected with the perfect person that's going to resonate with you in the perfect time with the perfect message. It's all from the same
Mhm.
source. It doesn't matter whether it's from the records or an astrology chart or a friend or just a song you listen to, or a thing that you stumble across. It's all
Yeah.
the same thing. And yeah, and what we said earlier, like you're like, nothing is ever random, right? Like we're always in the perfect spot to take our perfect next step with the perfect people and the perfect time, like, and whatever is not like, and when stuff feels uncomfortable, it's like it's there not randomly either, right? It's for us to look at what we can heal, or look at what we need to change, or look at what's not working, or just practice compassion, or whatever it is, like the next thing that we're developing. Yeah. um
I like that word. Like, it's interesting that you brought up compassion just now, because I feel like it really stood out from everything that you were listing as like and I think for me, what came up from there is like self-compassion being huge. And I don't know where that sits for me, but it just really stood out. So I wanted to mention that.
yeah, I it stood out because what I was thinking was that beginning piece of sitting with our emotions, right? And that sometimes, right, because part of it is really being aware of like, ooh, this relationship doesn't feel good. Like that's why you'll have these emotions, like so that as humans we can know like this is not right. I want to then speak up and say, hey, I don't like when you do that, and make a change. But sometimes our emotions aren't things that we need to try to stop or change, right? It's just like, okay, what does that feel like? Let's just be okay feeling that and like slow down and like know, oh, it feels like a tingling. Oh, it feels hot. Oh, it feels like this. I think it's this color, and not even put any labels on it. Just like try to
Mhm.
understand it and be with it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I
that
would call it
will
like
help it dissolve anyway.
yeah, I call it like noticing. Like sometimes you just need to notice, like see it, acknowledge it, and that's all it has to be,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like we don't need to solve everything or check every box or tie every experience up with like a pretty little bow. Like some things just are, and that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
and it can be really actually quite powerful, I think, to have that more neutral stance, like whether it be an emotion or in my life an entity that roams around my household or things like that, to just be able to see it, acknowledge it, and then release it. Like you said, like that release step, I think, can often come next. And there's that sense of peace from not having to judge or evaluate or make more of it than what it is, which is just an experience.
Yeah. That's so I'm curious about the entity because I have so many suggestions there with both ends, right? Because it's like part of it is right, like what we resist persists. So in that case, like yes, right, like just like accepting it's there, you can't get rid of it, and just like like actually getting to the end goal, because the reason right for wanting to get rid of it is probably like find peace. So it's like finding peace now while it's here, it's fine.
Mhm.
But then also there are, just FYI, either during this or later, like there are techniques depending if it is like a dark force energy to
Yeah.
transmute and all that stuff.
This one I helped cross, and she was really sweet. It was a little girl, and she'd been sent here by another young boy who'd actually been with me for like 2 decades. And my friend helped clear him at the beginning of my spiritual stuff. And apparently, he told her that my house was safe and I was really nice, which is why she came to stay with me. Um, and like I get chills talking about it. It was so sweet because when I helped her go, he was there waiting, like to like play with her on the other side. Um, so that's good, but I mean, they come and go, and I just, it's part of my journey right now, which I've been told multiple times, and one by the spirit that I am working with, is that I think these things are coming up so that I can learn to just respect the fact that like one dimension doesn't rule over the other, like they do coexist. And I need to not fight that. And like I need to just observe it and see it and like accept it. Um, and then once I can do that, like everything's good. But that's why I'm having a lot of these experiences currently, is like for my own, it's like spiritual boot camp for me. So they're like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll keep sending you entities so you can like stop freaking out eventually. And then
Yeah.
you'll be okay to deal with the ones you might want to freak out about. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Everything's, that's, I mean, it's all for a reason, like in relevance and supported for your growth.
Yeah, I wasn't very happy about that though. I was definitely like, why? Why did you do this?
Right.
But on that note, since you said you have some tips, like what would your go-to kind of be for because I know there's so many people in the group too, like the Soulscape group, who come to me for guidance on this, and like I can give them baby guidance, but like I'm not all knowing about clearing entities. So I'm curious, like what's your default that you like?
So, I mean, maybe I shouldn't have brought it up because I do think the reality is you do have to be really tapped into your intuition for then this to be an effortless, quick
Yeah.
thing, right? Like it comes from like first, your connection to source energy, and then like from, what you said, like really gaining confidence in your abilities and working in all of these, a multitude of ways, to the point where then you like your intentions and your visualizations carry such a intensity of weight that like you could just be blowing them up into light, and it would be different for whatever energy is in your presence, right? Like if it was a child spirit, you're not going to blow them up, you're going to help them, visualize them like being tied by a little balloon like up above, and like help them gently cross over in like a golden bubble or something, right? And you could communicate with them and help them feel safe with that. So like figure out, in your case it sounds like you're just being sent this kid who's, he's not going to bother you, just so that you can get used to like, guess what? You don't get to have all your own space for yourself, and you're going to learn to be fine with this.
Mhm.
But in another case, you'd want to like figure out why he's there or something like that. But when it's things like demons, parasites, and rituals and sacrifices, we just don't want that. I would, rather than me like sharing that, I'd recommend those people like go to someone who can help with energy clearing.
Yeah.
But it's also with people's intentions. You could smudge your space. You could visualize it being filled with light and see these beings, go back to where they came from, and also know that it is very, very common for these forces to be, all over. And then there's things like portals, they could just come back through. And it's like interesting too, because you would think like, oh, like if I'm, really positive and, full of light, wouldn't I not be an energetic match? It's like, you're also more of a magnet.
No, and that's why, honestly, like the thing I say to hair on my face, sorry. The thing I say to most people as a starting point, and I think this goes for everyone, is in just spiritual journeying as a whole, not necessarily like entity work, because I don't really do entity work. I just do it out of necessity as it comes up in my house. Or so I was thinking, is as much as you're expanding upward, like you need to root down. Like if you're working on your upper chakras, you need to be grounding all the time. Because otherwise, like I was, you're just kind of hovering in the middle and you're not protected from either end fully. So like that's step one. And then also just like clearing from yourself, like clearing grounding protection. And like I think anyone can do that. And that's a good like baseline. I mean, I taught my niece to do it. She's 7 years old. So she holds her tourmaline before bed and like pictures her bubble and just says like, I'm safe and I'm staying here tonight. And that's it. I was like, please don't astral project my niece. Like stay in your house. And so like little things like that, I think can be just a baseline for anyone who's dabbling in this spiritual world.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said like, that would come way later when you're like doing every kind of technique possible. And the first thing that I teach and that I do myself is actually I do have steps actually before even like practicing that connection, but that connection does include, yes, like connecting your crown and opening those chakras, but always rooting down.
Yep.
And then cutting cords, letting the negativity from you be, eliminated in the smoke and blast into light and whatever, and then adding the psychic protection, like before doing any records reading, before doing anything. You could do it before every day of your life.
That was my mistake. I didn't know. And my like entry into this was records reading. So it was an interesting couple months. Okay, cat, stop it. Sorry, my cat's trying to jump. And I had some backtracking to do after that, but now it's pretty okay. Yeah. But no, I think that's really important to touch on. And I think a lot of us, and like I too, like we get swept up in it because it's really exciting, but it's like there are those foundational steps that are really important. So I appreciate that you touched on that for sure.
It comes back to what you were saying is, when it's like, yes, you don't want to only have to follow this one thing, but the structure around it and having a container is really powerful. Because it's like, even for kids, it's like if they're in a fenced in area and the parents are standing on one side, like they're free to go run around and like play and like just have fun. But if there was no fence, like they're going to be like hovering by the parents the whole time and scared of what's out there. So it's just like when we have these frameworks for what we're doing. So whether that's like the practice to begin and, your intention, if you're going to astral travel and you already have like you can do this with meaning and intention, and you're specifying what types of beings you are going to connect with. And when you're going, like that, then you can use these as skills and abilities rather than being scared of what's happening and, all of that.
Oh, I love that full circle moment, and we didn't even plan it. I think that's beautiful. And I like that visual of the fence too. And the next thing I thought of is like that fence, like that safe zone kind of thing is also, I think for me, has been like the community, right? Like making these connections and not like bombarding myself in other people's experiences. Cause like we talked about, like we all have the nuances we follow, and we're developing our connection with intuition, source, whatever that is. But having people and perspectives to keep us safe and to keep us supported and keep us protected. And then within that, we can play and we can learn. And if we decide to step outside that bubble in time, we can at that point, like, I think, kind of trust and know that we have what we need to be able to do that safely, and then kind of move forward from there. Um, so yeah, I really like
That,
that image. Yeah.
that's such a valuable piece, and it's really like essential, right? Because part of a lot of people's spiritual journey, it's like, you call it dark night of the soul, and it's a
Mhm.
really inner and personal experience, and and that's where everything significant is happening. But as these shifts happen for people, it's just it inevitable, and is inevitably the case. Not that you can't still be friends with your current friends and connect with your current family. You can navigate that, but some of those relationships will fade out, and you will not have the same be on the same wavelength, be just as close as you were. So creating space and welcoming in new people that, are going to be able to, relate to what you're going through,
Mhm.
and that you can talk about this stuff with and feel safe with and feel encouraged with and empowered by is, I know, like, for me it's been really important and vital, and it's crazy because it ha- happens to just begin happening naturally when you open up to that.
Mhm.
But it's also something that, like, definitely, like, one of the biggest reasons, I guess, like, some people work with have been reaching out to me for coaching, because, wanting to, like, being a little scared about their intuition or senses, and wanting to develop them more.
Mhm.
um Having mentors, having coaches, having friends, having community is
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, and that's why I love, like, the Soulscape group too, like, where we're now connected and everything, and that's why so that was given, and I wrote about it in the group, but that was given to me through my records. They're like, "You need to have this group, and this is what it is," and then they gave me the name, and I was like, "What does that even mean?" But I went with it. Um, and it's that idea, it's like of having that, and I think, like you said, it can come up in different ways, like through mentors, coaches, friends, family, whatever, and in this like Facebook group of new friends who you maybe don't know. um it's like creating that space for the soul's perspective to come through, and I think having those different people to help cultivate and hold that space is really powerful and really important, especially, at least for me, in like the early stages of growing along that journey.
Yeah. And I love that they gave you that name that they knew was going to draw in the exact people that were going to be drawn to that group to create that exact, community.
Mhm.
Um, it's perfect.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Coffee Time. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if today's show resonated, I invite you to drop into the comment section and share whatever personal introspection came up for you today. Anything you can do to help make the show more accessible is super duper appreciated. Until next time, I am your host and coffee drinking companion, Natalie, wishing you a beautifully caffeinated day.